Today I'm going to be talking a bit about the severity of chronic severe OCD, something you will know all too well if you are in the thick of it. Now, I certainly lived like that for many years, many years with severe chronic OCD. And it was very, very challenging to say the least. Even now, when I was just looking at this chocolate bar just before starting this video, and I had a square of this chocolate here, do you know in the past I used to avoid having chocolate completely because what happened, I developed acid reflux due to chronic severe anxiety. And it got so bad that I ended up in hospital with esophagitis. So in my throat had become all swollen and damaged from chronic acid reflux that even when I was on protein pump it was before I was on protein pump inhibitors. I was on just the sort of Rennies you get from the corner store. And it's called breakthrough reflux, where the acid reflux cut through that. And then I was still getting acid reflux up in my throat. And I was young. I didn't know that was dangerous. It is if it's for prolonged periods. And so then I couldn't swallow food and I was choking. It was getting stuck and I had to go to hospital. They had to do an endoscopy, put a tube down there, which was incredibly uncomfortable because at the time I was with the esophagitis, my throat was really narrow because of the swelling. So when they put the tube down, I threw up 14 times and sort of throwing up every sort of 3 or 4 seconds, where it's a horrible feeling when you're having that procedure done. Until I was on the Nexium omeprazole, which then repaired that over the next month and I was able to eat properly again and so on. Before that, I was on a diet of just sort of soup and liquid food as my body was repairing from that. So that was a pretty brutal time, all caused by anxiety. And I used to avoid things like this chocolate because chocolate used to be the thing that was the catalyst for reflux. Despite when I was in the hospital having the endoscopy at the time, them giving me chocolate and everything after the procedure because their knowledge of diet was dreadful. It was just sort of fixing the problem, but not about lifestyle changes. And it was alcohol, chocolate, the junk food, all that stuff that was contributing to it. Once I changed my diet, that really helped, plus going on the omeprazole. However, nothing worked like recovery did. Recovery meant I could go back to eating everything. I can have 2 brandies in the evening, I could smoke a cigar, I could have chocolate, I could have pizza, I could have all of that and be fine. And I don't wake up with reflux in the night, and I don't wake up with that feeling of being sick in your mouth overnight. All those things. And then I used to be scared that I would get some kind of aspiration pneumonia because I'd wake up sort of with a choking sensation of acid in my throat. Really not fun. Really not a nice experience. So I do know the severity of what OCD can get like. That was just some of my physical symptoms. I had a range of all of them. I could go, in one of the old videos, I went from sort of head to toe, detailing all the difficult physical symptoms that I had at the time and how challenging those were. So we know what it's like to be where you are right now. You know, we've lived this journey. We've been in the depth of the trenches. We really have. And we know what works and what doesn't work. And we know what it feels like to just be told, you need to sit in and live in the now and mindfulness and thoughts when your nervous system feels like it's locked on 24/7 to chronic guilt and anxiety. I have lived that life. When I had contamination OCD, just getting in and out the shower took me 6 hours. Can you believe that today? How my life got like that? Because of harm OCD linked to contamination OCD. So I was cleaning for 6 hours a day because I felt if I didn't, I'd pass on HIV. So I was so scared of that. And I'd go through 6 shower gels a day, big bottles of shower gel finished a day. So you can imagine what my skin was like. If you get out of the bath and it feels like a prune, your skin, imagine after 6 hours, was not fun. And so we've lived that journey. When Momin came into me, he had such bad contamination OCD. He was like a prisoner in his house in Pakistan, in Lahore, and he couldn't even go from one room to the next. He couldn't drive for years. He spent years just in bed. I mean, we've been there to the depths. We know what it's like. We know how severe OCD gets. And, it's one of those things that unless you have it, you really don't understand the extent it can get to. When I was suffering with sensory motor OCD, particularly latched to breathing, it felt like I was manually breathing 24/7. It was locked on my breath, so every breath felt like the in and out was locked in the nervous system, in the anxiety cycle, and I couldn't switch out of that locked sensation. So I felt my nervous system was broken. I felt I was trapped in the breath forever, which was a very scary thought. and my brain didn't like sort of unglue from being in the nervous system on the breath. It was a very horrible feeling, and if you know you have that, you'll know what I mean. You feel like you can never enjoy a bath again. You can never enjoy just lying in bed and watching a film. Everything feels like you're just a prisoner in your conscious awareness, which then brought about the other themes like existential, solipsism, sensory motor, solipsism and simulation theory, where I felt like, how can I even know my reality and my consciousness? And then I felt sort of uber locked in that, where I was like too conscious, too aware of my own existence. And then that became a huge struggle. You know, we've worked with thousands of people with all of these themes, tens of thousands of people. And we know what it's like when you're in that, and we know what recovery feels like because we're in that position. You just feel like back how you were before chronic OCD latched, and you'll think you won't get to that, but it's only because you're so scared right now. When you do get to that, then you think, oh my God, I can't believe I got so bad. And so it's easy to go between one or the other. And when you recover, you really, you know, you're not sort of waxing and waning. You're back to that default baseline inner peace, and you feel refreshed. You feel you've got the energy to live life how you want to. You feel like you can do all the things that you want to do. It's a very different experience, you know. Everything just changes, because some people will say to me, yeah, but I can never remember feeling good. I can never remember feeling good, right? Well, it doesn't matter, because you had that chronic OCD then or OCD then. It just goes back to when you had some glimpse of what calm feels like, that but longer, right? And you then don't rely on being comfortable. Like I was on a long haul flight about a couple of months ago. In the background on the table there is just a little bag that was full of like things like deodorant and stuff they gave out on the plane. And when I was on that, I just thought, you know, it's nice to have these little essentials, these things that make life more comfortable, right? But I didn't give a shit. I don't give a shit about anything like that today, because just to be able to be free is all I wanted. Like if someone had said to me in the past, like, do you want to recover from OCD, but every hotel you stay in for the rest of your life is 1 star and there's cockroaches in there? 100%, because you just want back to free. Because when you're in an OCD state, it's like you're being chronically tortured in your mind. I didn't care about luxuries. I didn't care about anything like that. All I cared about was being back to baseline calm. And that's really key, because people don't realize that. Like in life, if you've got the flu or you're sick, what do you want? You want to be back to not having the flu. Like you can have the best life, you could be a big celebrity, but if you've got the flu, you just want to be better. You don't give a shit you're a celebrity. You don't give a shit about any of that, right? And that's the same with OCD recovery. When you recover, just gives life that spark of life. It just gives life that extra layer of energy. Because when you're in the midst of chronic severe OCD, it's like being sick all the time. And it's not fun. I don't fear it. I don't fear going back to that. But I'm just glad that I'm not in that. And when you aren't in that, you just feel so much more energy. You're not being sort of like taxed by your nervous system 24/7. And so you can just enjoy things like I just said there with that bar of chocolate. I can eat that and never have to question it. When I was stuck with that bloody acid reflux, everything I was questioning, okay, can't eat chocolate, can't have pepperoni pizza, I'll just have margarita, please, just a water, not sparkling, in case that gives me the acid reflux sensation. Then your whole diet and living becomes a giant anxiety compulsion. Like loads of people I work with acid reflux, so that first thing is getting them not to be scared of foods again, because then I was avoiding Coca-Cola and I was avoiding everything, no drinking, no socializing, and it becomes like that, right? And it came on so quickly, I thought that like my body was just super extra sensitive. Now, having worked with so many people now, I see so many people with this, of course, I realize, no, this is what happens with anxiety. But when it first happened, it was particularly challenging, because what happened to me was I initially developed gastritis many years before the acid reflux. And even drinking a pint of beer would make me throw up because my stomach was inflamed. One, because I was eating too much, because I was weight training. I was obsessed with had body dysmorphia and was obsessed with gaining muscle. And two, because I was so anxious that was just causing a lot of discomfort in the stomach, right? When you're anxious, you can often rely on too much sugary food to get that feel-good high. You can often eat shit junk food because everything feels like a chore and mentally draining. So you think, I don't want to bother putting energy into getting food, I'll just get a takeaway. So it's very easy why people get overweight and out of shape. Like when you read statistics and people are like, yes, anxiety and depression makes you have this much higher heart attack risk. That's because people are sedentary and not eating. In of itself, no. But if you are just laying down and eating shit, you're going to gain weight and you're going to get unhealthy. So that's why we have to get our life back and get our life back healthy, because very quickly that all becomes a problem. It's a very vicious cycle if you don't watch out. So it's very important to think, no matter how stuck you are, you're not alone in this. People have been through this. I had a very hard time with physical anxiety and themes. Hundreds of themes, sometimes one theme locked on for years. Severity, I would put myself in the bottom 3 or 4% of people I work with. Very, very, very severe. And it's funny. Looking back, it feels like a separate life. Why? Because when you are in it, you can't imagine what it feels like to not be in it. When you're out of it, it's hard to remember exactly what it felt like to be in it. That's what these things are like. It's like I was working with a girl who had cancer. She was very ill. She recovered. And I remember seeing her many years later, and she's like sort of complaining about some trivialities in life. And I was like, you remember where you were with cancer? She's like, yeah, I just forget it. That's like not in my life anymore. And that's what life's like. It's like if you're really broke, you think, oh my God, if I just made a bit more money, I'd be fine. But then when you're doing all right, you spend it on stupid things because you don't prioritize, because we forget everything. And that's the same as recovery. How many people come to me and they're like coasting for ages? Oh, I don't want to come in for a session. I think I'll be all right on my own. Like, you ain't going to be all right on your own if you've been like that for months after months after months and you're not improving. You've got to improve. You've got to take steps forward. Like, I would rather recover from OCD than pretty much every other priority. That was my mindset when I was like that. If I was in your position too, that over every other priority, because it makes life so much sort of mentally richer, right? In terms of your human experience being better. So the things that you're putting as a priority over it, probably you've got them completely skewed. Like, even if it's watching films, going on holiday, whatever it is, those are great things for life structure and enjoying your life, absolutely, and shouldn't be avoided. But at the same time, you've got to think, where do you rank OCD recovery? Because it's going to make all those experiences so much better. Like, my holidays with chronic severe OCD were pretty shit, but you still got to go on them, otherwise you avoid everything. That's a key part of recovery too. And you can still take in the experience even when it feels like shit. Even those shit holidays, I still got to see so much, and it was so much better than being at home. But it does make life so much richer when you recover, because you're not in that entangled, engulfed mental state of chronic guilt and anxiety. And particularly the chronic guilt, because it felt like I was sort of being tortured by my nervous system 24/7. And every moment I tried to distract myself, it says, oh, you should feel extra guilty because you let yourself off the hook for a moment. So be aware of these things. We know the depth of what the chronic OCD suffering can feel like. You're going to have to put in the work to recover. You can completely change your mental framework. You can get back to baseline default peace. But you're not going to wake up one morning and bang, it's just gone. Okay? That's not how it works. Like, it was a 24/7 thing when I was stuck with OCD, and recovery took a lot of work, because with OCD, my whole mind was compulsions. My life was compulsions. I was avoiding so much, and I needed to really work on my life philosophies because I had so much black and white rigid thinking. And that is all part of the recovery journey, and what we can work through with you, breaking those down. So we're changing that internal framework, which then changes the internal weather, so you feel less guilty and anxious. You're not going to do that by just saying, it's just a thought, or I'm going to try and live in the now and do some mindfulness and meditation exercise. OCD is going to cut through that like a hot knife in butter. So you've got work to do, and you can get your life back and start living how you want to live it. But it's going to take practice, 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 and persistence. But you can get there.